Hi friends, welcome to our YouTube channel Civil Ed. I am Professor Shivaprasad from Civil Ed team. We, the Civil Ed team, have planned for introducing video lectures on research methodology, aiming to provide the beginners an easy way of understanding and preparing for entrance tests for PhD, NET, and other eligibility tests that demand for answering objective type questions in research methodology. Our video lectures would cover syllabi of entrance tests topic wise so as to ease the learners. The video lectures shall have a brief discussion on the theory of the related topic and followed by a discussion on related objective questions of the respective topics. For continued preparations of your entrance tests, kindly subscribe to our channel Civil Ed so that you are kept notified to our upcoming videos. Also, do share amongst your friends and colleagues so that it reaches all the learners. In this video lecture, we shall begin with an introduction to research methodology, and the contents of this video lecture are introduction to research methodology, meaning of research, objectives of research, types of research, and research approaches. So to begin with, let's understand research in general terms. So in general terms, research refers to a search for knowledge. This search for knowledge should be systematic and scientific in approach and should be pertinent to a specific topic. So it is said to be an art of scientific investigation, and research is a movement of knowledge from known person to unknown person. Now let's look into the meaning of research. So the Advanced Learner's Dictionary of Current English lays down the following meaning of research. So research is a careful investigation or inquiry, especially through search for new facts in any branch of knowledge. So this is the meaning given in Advanced Learner's Dictionary of Current English. Please remember these sentences as they are, so it might be asked in objective types questions. Moving on, we'll look into the definition given by Redman and Mori. So they define research as a systematic effort to gain new knowledge. Further moving on with the meaning of research. According to Clifford Woody, research comprises of defining and redefining problems, formulating hypotheses or suggested solutions, collecting, organizing and evaluating data, making deductions and reaching conclusions, and at last carefully testing the conclusions to determine whether they fit in the formulating hypothesis. So if you observe here, you are not able to understand many terminologies. So this definition given by the authors Clifford Woody, they have just tried to fit in the complete process of research here. So if you just understand all the topics of research methodology, you will get to know this is the flow of actual research. So just you need to remember these sentences along with the author's name, so that if they ask the author's name in objective types questions, you can very well answer them or tick the correct author against the definitions given. So moving on, the next authors, Singer and Stephenson, in the Encyclopedia of Social Sciences, define research as the manipulation of things, concepts or symbols for the purpose of generalizing to extend, correct or verify knowledge, whether that knowledge aids in construction of theory or in the practice of an art. Moving on to objectives of research. The main objectives of research are to gain familiarity with the phenomenon or to achieve new insights into it, to portray accurately the characteristics of a particular individual, situation or a group, to determine the frequency with which something occurs or with which it is associated with something else, to test a hypothesis of a causal relationship between variables. So, for a beginner, many terminologies over here might look new. So, just to make you understand for now, hypothesis can be regarded as a tentative solution for a problem. So, further in our further videos, when we cover next topics, we are going to explain all these things in detail. That is, we have one complete topic on testing hypothesis or hypothesis testing. So, let us move on to types of research. So, we have four major types of research. Let us look into them. Firstly, we have applied versus fundamental research, quantitative versus qualitative research, descriptive versus analytical research, and conceptual versus empirical research. These four are the major groups we have formed. So, any other type of research we will be discussing after this will directly or indirectly they come under these four major types. So, to continue with this, let us take up each type of these researches in detail. Applied research versus fundamental research. Applied research aims to solve specific problem. It aims at finding an immediate solution to a problem facing a society or an industry or an organization. For example, the research to identify social, economic or political trends that may affect a particular institution, marketing research or evaluation research. So, these are the examples for applied research. The central aim of applied research is to discover a solution for some pressing practical problems that is faced by a society at the immediate point of time. So, this is what is applied research. Moving on, let us look into fundamental research. Fundamental research is also known as basic research or pure research. Please remember, fundamental research is also known as basic research or pure research. Fundamental research is mainly concerned with formulation of a new theory or advancement of an existing knowledge with its generalizations. Gathering knowledge for knowledge's sake is termed as fundamental research. That is what the authors believe. For example, research concerning to natural phenomenon or relating to pure mathematics, physics, human behavior and its generalizations are under the fundamental research. Basic research is directed towards finding information that has broad base applications, and thus it adds to the already existing organized body. This fundamental research satisfies certain curiosities like what makes things happen, why society changes, why social relationships are in a certain way, and so on. To sum up, basic research or fundamental research is purely theoretical to increase our understanding of a phenomenon. So, moving on, we will have this quantitative versus qualitative research. Quantitative research is based on collection of data or quantitative measurements of some characteristics. It is applicable to phenomenon that can be expressed in terms of quantities. The research data is mainly in the form of questionnaire surveys or checklists that are statistically analyzed. This method assumes that world is stable. Please remember, this method, that is quantitative method of research, assumes that world is stable, and so it can be measured and quantified. The approach is said to be deductive or logical. On the other hand, qualitative research is concerned with a phenomenon relating to a quality or kind. An important type of qualitative research is motivation research, which aims to discover the underlying motives and desires. The research data is through in-depth interviews, word association tests, sentence completion tests, story completion tests, etc. Qualitative research is especially important in behavioral sciences. While doing such research, the researcher should seek the guidance from experimental psychologists. The approach is said to be inductive or empirical. So this inductive and deductive approach, what we exactly mean by that, we'll just further discuss them when we take up that type of research. So next we have descriptive versus analytical research. Under descriptive research deals with surveys and fact-finding inquiries of different kinds. In this, the researcher does not deals with how things happen, but only deals with what and why. Here the researcher has no control over the variables, and in fact that is the main characteristic of this particular research. He can only report what has happened and why it has happened. So the examples would be ex post facto research projects such as frequency of shopping, preferences of people, etc. So ex post facto means the research conducted after a fact has happened. So those who are not aware of it, and these are the studies what researcher cannot alter. So he has no control over the variables so that he can alter. It's not possible in this type of research. So this type of research states the scenario the way it exists in the present. So it identifies the state as it exists at the present. It includes survey studies, interrelationship studies, and development studies. So the best example which I would prefer would be for this type of research would be an outbreak of an epidemic disease, wherein the researcher tries to describe what and why of the fact, that is epidemic outbreak, and he does not address how the fact has happened. So please remember, in this type of research, the researcher does not deal with how a fact has happened. And moving on to analytical research. Analytical research is a continuation of descriptive research. So the best example would be the after effects of a fact which has happened earlier. The research attempts to analyze and explain why or how something is happening. Thus, analytical research aims to understand a phenomenon by discovering and measuring causal relations among them. Okay, so just remember, analytical research is a continuation of descriptive research. So in descriptive research, what is happening in the present is being described, and in analytical research what has happened, how it has happened will be described. It is on the later on stage. The next type of research, that is conceptual versus empirical. So first, conceptual research is that type of research related to some abstract ideas, concepts or theory. It is generally used by philosophers and thinkers to develop new concepts or to reinterpret the existing ones. Usually some authors describe this conceptual research as pen and paper, because here the researcher sits at his desk with a pen in hand and tries to solve the problem by thinking about the problem. Here the researcher tries to tackle the problem part by part. He breaks down the concept into smaller and simpler parts to understand it better. This method is preferred in social sciences and philosophy. On the other hand, empirical type of research relies on experience or observations only, and it is also called experimental type of research. It is data based research wherein the conclusions drawn are capable of being verified by experiments. The researcher first provides a working hypothesis, then works to get enough facts or data to prove this assumed working hypothesis, or he may try to prove or disprove the hypothesis finally. So again, this hypothesis, proving or disproving, all these things will be explained well when we take up a topic on testing hypothesis. So here the research is characterized by an experimental program so that so as to bring forth the desired information out of it. The research is characterized by the researcher's control over the variables. Yes, here in empirical type of research, the researcher has complete control over the variables under study. The evidence gathered through such research, that is empirical studies, are considered to be most powerful for testing the hypothesis. So now let's look into some other types of research, as now we have covered those 4 major types of research. So to begin with, let's understand what is meant by inductive research. So inductive research uses example, patterns and trends in observations to reach a conclusion. A preferable ethnographic inductive logic follows this path, that is to read and interact. That is what we begin with. We gain experience over what we have read, and we try to describe it and finally elaborate the explanation. So here it is going as part to whole, that is it starts from a smaller thing or a discussion, and it goes on to describe in an elaborate explanation. So we term it as specific to general theory or part to whole. So again, on the other hand, deductive type of research is reasoning from general to certain, that is we have a broad general idea and we work towards confining it. That is called deductive type of research. The hypothetical deductive logic follows read or observe, that is how it begins, and develop the idea, gather evidence, test the findings and evaluate what is being found. So here the flow is from whole to part or general to specific. So that's what is deductive type of research. Moving on, we can just elaborate on these ethnographic inductive logic or ethnographic inductive reasoning. So what is this? It is a qualitative method. Here the researcher interacts with other participants. It is popularized by anthropology and it is used in social sciences. On the other hand, hypothetical deductive reasoning is a sort of empirical method. It starts with a general theory and it moves on, or it confines to a specific type, and here the hypothesis is formulated in the beginning, and deductions of the hypothesis is done by testing. Moving on, we have this experimental research. Again, we have already seen empirical research, which is similar to that. Purely experimental research it follows scientific approach. Here the researcher can manipulate the variables, or he can use he can bring in new variables in between or delete variables. The researcher has physical control over his experiments. He relies on this type of research relies on experimental evidence to conclude. On the other hand, non-experimental type of research, here we don't conduct any experiment, but whatever observations or data we have collected will be analyzed by statistical approach. The manipulations can't be made for the variables under consideration. This type of research relies on interpretation, observations, or interactions to conclude. One more type of research, that is correlational research. It is a type of research in which it is a non-experimental case. The researcher measures relationship between two variables in this case, and the range of values of correlation would be from -1, 0 to +1. A strong positive correlation is designated with +1, and a strong negative correlation is designated with -1, and no correlation means it is represented by 0. Moving on with the next type of research, we have exploratory and confirmatory research. So in exploratory research, it aims at connecting ideas or to unveil the wise potential to cause-effect relationships. This occurs when researchers get started at understanding what they are actually observing during the process of building cause-effect models. See here, in exploratory type of research, the researcher has no idea of what's happening, but he just explores new things based on the potential of cause-effect relationships. On the other hand, confirmatory research, here the researchers have a pretty good idea of what's going on. The researcher has several theories based on which he is confirmed that what stated by him is in par with these stated theories. The objective of this type of research is to find out if the theory is supported by the facts. So next we have historical research. It is a qualitative research. The studies it is the studies about the meaning of the past events. It attempts to interpret the facts. It explains the cause of events. It explains their effect in the present events. On the other hand, we have formative versus summative research. Formative versus summative, they both are described together because Formative research is exploratory and is done at the beginning of any given design project to guide the entire process. And against that, summative research is that we do at the end of the project, that is summative or conclusion research it is called. It is done at the end of the project and is used to determine its success. It can gauge customer satisfaction or aid in the development of future projects. Next, moving on, we have diagnostic research. So this terminology may look related only in terms of medical field, but it is not so. It refers to the practice of looking for better ways to identify a particular disorder or condition, not only in terms of medical terms, but also to it is applicable to a machinery also, for example. Usually it go deep into the causes using very small samples. A small prototype or a small sample is studied and the depth of the cause is determined. So it is also called clinical research. So next we have this action research. Here the researcher and client collaborate in the diagnosis of a problem and in the development of a solution. Usually this type of action research is carried out in educational environment. So a method to test in real world environment problem, we use this action research. It improves educational programs in schools individually or to a given district or statewide or nationwide. So moving on with the next type of research, here we have cross-sectional versus longitudinal research. These two research types are based on the number of variables. So let's see, in cross-sectional study, multiple variables can be studied at a single point of time. Multiple variables, keep this in mind. In cross-sectional study, multiple variables can be studied at a single point of time, whereas in longitudinal research, only one variable is considered to conduct the entire study. So what is that main difference between these two is, the main difference is that cross-sectional studies interview a fresh sample of people. Okay, so as we know, we carry out sampling for any research, and that in that sampling, in case of cross-sectional research, we consider fresh sample of people each time when they are carried out, whereas in longitudinal studies they follow the same sample of the people over time, that is throughout a given project same sample of people are considered. Moving on to the last type of research, that is conclusion versus decision oriented research. This is based on the end statement, what we do, whether it is a conclusion based or it is decision based. So in conclusion research, a researcher is free to pick up a problem, redesign the inquiry as he proceeds, and is prepared to conceptualize as he wishes. That is the art hidden in conclusion bound research projects, whereas in decision oriented research projects, the researcher is always for the need of a decision maker, and the researcher is not free to embark upon according to his own inclination. So this completes different types of research. So these were the other types of research above those four types of research, major types of research which we had taken in the beginning. So moving on to research approaches. Basically we have two types of research approaches, namely qualitative approach and quantitative approach. Quantitative research approach is further branched into inferential approach, experimental approach, and simulation approach. In inferential approach, the research forms a database to infer characteristics or relationships. In case of experimental approach, there is a great control over the research environment, and in this case some variables are manipulated to observe their effect on other variables. In case of simulation approach, it involves the construction of an artificial environment within which relevant information and data can be generated. So these are the basic approaches of research, and any other research type would follow with these two research approaches. Next, at the end, let's discuss the meaning of scientific method in research. So scientific method is the philosophy common to all research methods and techniques. So the author Carl Pearson defines the scientific method as the scientific method is one and same in the branches of science, and that method is the method of all logically trained minds. The unity of all sciences consists alone in its methods, not its material. The man who classifies facts of any kind whatever, who sees their mutual relation and describes their sequences, is applying the scientific method and is a man of science. So please note that this entire definition was given by Carl Pearson on scientific method. Scientific method is the pursuit of truth as determined by logical considerations. The ideal science is to achieve a systematic interrelation of facts, and finally we can say scientific method attempts to achieve an idea by experimentation, observation, logical arguments from accepted postulates, and a combination of these three in varying proportions. So with this we have come to the end of this first lecture video on research methodology. That is, we have covered introduction part and types of research. So next, in the next video you may expect objective type questions solved and discussed for whatever theory we have discussed till now. So friends, kindly subscribe to our channel to be updated with the research methodology topics in the upcoming videos. Thank you.